Hi, welcome to the Lisa Saunders Show. As you can see from the sign behind me, I am here with the publisher of Pathfinder magazine, Dr. Joanne Moore, and I'm really excited to have her on. We're really going to talk about why she started this magazine that's about widows and widowers. Joanne, tell me how you even got there. Tell me about your marriage and your life before you started this magazine.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me, Lisa. It's a pleasure to be here. And we're going to talk about something today that's difficult for a lot of people to talk about. It's difficult for people who are still married to think about this possibility. And it's difficult for those people who have gone through it to bring up some things that might be difficult to consider. I was 19 when I got married.
So you were 19. How old were you when you met him?
18.
18. Okay, and you got married a year later. And how did you meet him?
Well, he was a sailor, a submarine sailor.
Okay.
In Groton, and I worked at a local boatyard. For the summer, I was a college freshman. And I had an outdoor job at the boatyard, pumping gas and picking up trash in the parking lot.
Did you have to do that pump out station thing?
No, that was definitely not my job.
I just found out what that was recently.
I have some standards.
Okay. So he was there?
He was there. He and his shipmate bought an old wooden sailboat, and they spent the summer refurbishing it.
All right. And so you met?
And so we met that way. And he invited me to the Newport Jazz Festival. And my mother said, "You are not leaving the state with a sailor." And so that was that. We stayed local, and we did get married. He put me through college.
That's really amazing.
Then I put him through college.
Okay.
Then I got a master's degree. Then he got a master's degree. Then I went back for my doctorate, and he said, "That's it, you win. That's all the education I'm getting." But we were always looking forward. And looking forward to the good years that we would have later in life.
When you
we were
retired.
always working for those good times.
Okay.
We had our children. We spent 15 years taking care of his mother as well, who had had a stroke. So we were really committed to our family and to our unit. And everything that we did was built around that. He was a fun kind of guy. His laugh just filled the room. He was as honest as the day was long. He was a hard worker.
So he was your best friend?
He truly was someone I could lean on through thick and thin. And on the other hand, even though he was a really strong person, he empowered me to be a strong person as well. He was proud of my efforts in
did you start your business
career
as a physical therapist while you were married?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I own Shoreline Physical Therapy in East Lyme as well. And he did the computer work for the business, but for the most part it was my business, and he had another job. So when he developed cancer the first time...
How old was he?
He was maybe 58, 57 or 58.
So young. I mean, just young.
Right. He failed a couple courses of chemo, so he got a stem cell transplant and did fabulous with that. Really recovered nicely from that very difficult situation. And then he was diagnosed with Parkinson's, so he had a couple of years of progression of Parkinson's. And then he finally got the mesothelioma, and he died of that.
So he was sick for how long?
Probably 7 years
7
altogether.
years you had this thought that he is not going to make it to retirement years the way you guys had planned.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So that's when the disappointment came in. We fought pretty hard. We didn't give up easily. We got a lot of treatment, a lot of support.
At what point did you know you were going to lose him before he died?
I probably had about 6 months of good notice.
Of really knowing. And then when he actually died, what was it like to become a widow at 57? Were you 50?
Right. I was 57. It just felt like somebody had pulled the rug out from under me, that we had worked so hard to build this foundation, and it was solid.
Yeah, all this schooling and all this taking care of family, all looking forward to the time you could retire.
Right.
And it's over.
And it was over. And so I had to look for some mentors, some other people who had been through this.
Were you actually, so you were seeking other people, would you say?
Absolutely.
Not, you weren't withdrawing, because I hear some widows or people that lost children don't leave the house for a year. That wasn't you.
I was back at work in 2 weeks.
Because you had, first of all, you had a business. You didn't have the luxury, or not, I shouldn't say luxury, because it's not a good thing probably to sit in your house for a year.
I think it's a very individual thing.
Okay, so you were back at work forcing yourself to move forward, and you were looking for people and resources, and what did you find?
Right. Well, I went to the hospice support group, and they were fabulous. I think I went 1 hour a week for 6 weeks.
Is that through the hospital?
Through the hospital, or Hospice of Southeastern Connecticut. And,
Okay.
And they ran it at Lawrence Memorial Hospital, and it was a great program for that initial grieving stages.
Right. Is that, now you're allowed to go as long as you want? Or
Sure.
Is it, okay.
A year for sure you're welcome, and then they try to help you find other resources.
Okay. So what did that do
But one
for you?
day-
What was lacking?
It was fine as far as it went. But one day I woke up and I noticed there was a spring in my step. And it was shocking because I had gotten so used to walking slowly.
And
I
just
hadn't.
kind of getting through the day instead of
Right.
you were just trying to get through the end of the day. You weren't really walking it with purpose.
Right.
Walking towards something.
Right.
Okay, so suddenly you got out of bed, or you realized, hey, I'm actually excited about the day. Is that what happened?
Right.
Okay.
And some energy started coming back. And I thought, well, now what do I do? I had just gotten good at being sad. I've perfected this.
How long did it take you to start getting that spring in your step?
It was probably 8 or 9 months.
So a little less than the standard year that they tell you have to be miserable for?
Perhaps.
Okay.
It's a little vague. It was 6 years ago, so it's a little vague.
Okay.
But it was about that time frame. And so I started looking to see how do other people do it. And
Do what? Like move on and have a life?
I would
or-
see a group of older people sitting at a table laughing in a restaurant, and I thought, how do you get from here to there?
To where you have friends
Right.
that aren't all sitting there with their husbands. Was that hard to be with your married friends?
Sometimes.
So you felt like you were happy to find other people that were widowed or divorced. Did it matter to you if they were divorced or widowed or?
Well, a friend is a friend, and I have to say my married friends have been fabulous. Both them and their husbands
Right.
have been truly stalwarts for me.
Right.
So, but I needed to learn a new way
Right.
of doing things. And so I started seeking people who could give me stories,
Stories about
how they did it.
how they went on to be the lady or man sitting at a table laughing with a bunch of friends.
Right.
That's what you wanted to know. How to be laughing with friends.
Right.
Again. Okay.
Right.
Friends of your own, friends doing new things. Okay. So you
Yes.
started looking for stories. And
And I found that some people had really found a way to make life meaningful and joyful in some way. They found a talent that they had always meant to explore, and so they started taking lessons like painting and really blossoming and doing well.
Right.
And there were people who got interested in research in marine biology and learned so much and grew in that field. Whatever it was that they wanted to do.
so now how did those stories give you the idea to start Pathfinder, this magazine?
My idea was that everyone needed to hear the stories because reinventing the wheel yourself is so hard. You only have so many resources and so much energy. And so maybe by hearing someone else's story, it might give you some creative ideas.
Okay, so you like stories of hope, and you started
Right.
collecting them and thinking, gee, there's no magazine out there for the widower's journey?
There's very
that-
little.
Is that what happened? Like, that's a big leap because you're a physical therapist.
Right.
You have a business.
Right.
And I work with you, and I know how much time you put into I mean, I don't know, but I feel like you're really on top of the entire magazine.
Well, I get up at 5 and I work on Pathfinder from 5 to 8, and then I go to work from 9 to 5. Mm-hmm. And then I keep thinking, the ideas just keep coming in the stories. I want to give people permission to be happy. The first couple times that you laugh, you feel guilty that maybe you're not honoring their life properly. And so there's always a feature in here on how to honor their life without being miserable. It's not a badge of honor to be miserable.
Right. Because I do know some people that feel like it's their duty to mope around when they've lost somebody.
Yes.
You know, because I felt guilty sometimes moving on and being happy after losing a child. But then I thought, she would want me to be happy.
Right.
She's pain-free now.
Right.
And I guess a widower needs to kind of say that my spouse would want me to be happy. Is that what you think? Or?
Well, whether they would or not, frankly, because we tend to make our late spouse into a saint.
Right.
Oh, he would always want what's best for us. Well, in fact, some of the times, the spouse was below average. So no matter what they would have wanted for us, we have the right and the responsibility to live every stage of life to the best of our capacity.
Yes, right.
And when we get to the end of our lives, we can discuss it with them about how we decided to do things. Writing is just so therapeutic.
Yes, yes. I think a lot of people like to write. And now you want to hear from the widowed, right?
I do.
You would like to invite people to write to you.
I want to hear your story.
Right.
If you're a widow or a widower, I want to hear your story because I can learn from you and I can share that with other people who can learn from you. And so we invite people to write in to thewidowedpathfinder.com and write a letter to the editor, tell us your story, or if you know someone who you think we should feature, introduce us.
Like, that's what's so fun about meetings, because I meet with you once a month and the other writers, and it's a lot of fun talking about the new widow that we've met and the kind of great stories they have. And
it goes both ways, doesn't it? Like the woman you featured who gambled her money away.
Right.
Not everyone lives well.
Right.
Some people make some stupid mistakes, and we don't want everyone to make that same mistake.
To be gambling away their inheritance.
Right. That was an astounding story. And then there are other people who live really well.
Right. Right. So I do like the stories about mistakes. Now, you've had dating mistakes, right? Other kinds
Toxic relationships. We talk about how to start dating again if that's something that you're interested in.
Right.
Because my last date was 1970. So things have changed.
And how to dress, what each outfit means, that the signals you're sending.
Exactly. I took a course in adult ed about dating after 50.
Oh,
and one of our assignments was come to the next class dressed as you're going on a first date. And I must have stood in my closet for 5 minutes just spinning in circles. I had no idea where to start. It was really incredible how difficult that is.
And all that's what's fun about reading the magazine. Now, I'm not widowed, but of course I love reading it. I love reading the recipes. I love reading the book reviews, because a lot of times, I don't have a chance to get through all these books, but if Patricia makes one sound good, I'm like, I just might read that one. So there's a wide variety. You call this magazine, it's really not for that necessarily that initial stage of greeting. It's really a lifestyle magazine, because it's really about moving forward and giving you ideas for new adventures, new ways to make friends, new ways to travel. I mean, it's really a lot of new ways to do things.
Right.
Like, I love the story on gifts under $10. And it just was clever ideas.
When we talk about money, we don't preach about what percentage of your money should be in stocks and what percentage should be in bonds. It's more about managing your everyday affairs.
Right.
How to buy some really nice gifts without spending too much.
Well, they were clever ideas that.
And the same thing with food. It's not about you should eat spinach every day, but it's more like how to make friends with food. Like if a neighbor's sick, here's a recipe for something to bring over to them. Because that's how we make friends with people. We care about them when they have a need.
Right.
And so that's a way to rebuild your friendships.
Recipe, I was looking at that.
Right.
You know, and you've interviewed some famous widowers, like unfortunately Dr. Pettit. Right?
Dr. Pettit was so generous, talking about losing his wife and daughters to violence.
To a violent, crime in Connecticut. That was, I didn't live in Connecticut when that crime happened, but that was a big news horror story.
That was very serious.
So I was glad to read about him and how he's moving forward and what he's doing for others.
He was one we used in her honor. In other words, how he's honoring her life by the way he's continuing to live his.
Right.
Because of her, he is doing some phenomenal things.
Right.
In terms of research for multiple sclerosis, because she had MS, and he does fundraising for that, sponsoring girls who are interested in science, and helping with their education because his daughters were. So he's using that experience to make the world better in a lot of ways.
And how did you honor your husband?
Well,
his memory. You do something unusual.
He wanted to have a forest. And so now I have 260 acres of forest land, and I'm a steward for it. And the purpose of that land is to log a little bit every generation to help our grandchildren, all of his descendants, with their mortgages. He came from a farm family, and they believed in not having a mortgage because if you have bad times, you can lose the farm.
Right.
So you work, you pay off that mortgage as fast as you can.
Right.
So it's my job to be a steward of that land, to work with the forester and take care of it so that my grandchildren can get some help with their mortgages.
Yeah, that's a unique, different thing. Do you have any particular articles that stuck with you, or you were just telling me before the show started some articles you're excited, you're looking forward to?
Well, I am. You know, everyone talks about Maria von Trapp from The Sound of Music, and we feature someone, as you know, from history every year because we're not the first people to go through this. This has been going on since the beginning of time. So Captain von Trapp was widowed when he met Maria.
Right.
And so this story that you wrote centers on the Captain von Trapp and how he dealt with being a widower and managing his children until he found the right woman to come along and help him with his life.
I love looking into that story because I knew the movie, but you just don't know him, you know, but I read a book that she wrote. And it was so enlightening to read about her and how close the movie actually was to her life. I mean, yeah, there's some Hollywood things to move things along in a certain way, but I have to say, and I think it's great that you actually vacate, because also the movie ends, you don't realize necessarily that they start a lodge here.
They do.
In Vermont.
It's my favorite vacation spot.
And that's where you go every year.
Yeah.
And so that was pretty exciting, some of the images you got for the magazine article.
Right.
So I think that was a lot of fun to dig into that. Like, I love my column, The Widowers of History. And thank you that you always let me pick my own widower.
I know. Well, you featured Mr. Hershey from Hershey Chocolate, Norman Rockwell. I think a lot of people don't know their stories and how much they've been a part of American culture.
Right, and what happened to them when they became widowed and what they did about it and how their lives took some very interesting directions.
Right.
Because when you're not married, yes, you are sad, but you also, you know, as Maria von Trapp would always say, if God closes a window or closes a door, he opens a window. So suddenly some lives can take some very interesting directions. I'm excited now to do Grandma Moses. I just started reading her. Because sometimes I pick a widower and I have to tell you, Joanne, I'm not feeling it. I read what's happened, they're not going anywhere, and it's great because you always release me from it if I'm just not excited about that.
Well, not everyone went on to live an interesting and joyful life, did they?
No.
Some people
and even if they make horrible mistakes, if they're interesting mistakes, and I like to write about them.
Well, we can learn and laugh from them too.
Right.
Right.
And I'm glad you let me write the pets, even though I think it's kind of cute that you're not a huge fan of pets yet.
Yet.
And I thought your comment was funny. Do you mind sharing that about what the questions you were asked on the online dating about pets? And I just thought it was so funny.
Right, I did an online profile, and there was nowhere to write that you don't want any pets.
Right, it was like, which pets do you love? And you wanted to say, but I don't love any. I'm not looking for a man that has a dog or a cat or a fish.
Well, fish are not too bad. See, some are negotiable. I'm not
Okay.
completely closed-minded. But it's such a part of American culture now to have a pet in the house.
Right.
And so I couldn't write that article, clearly. Right. But it's still an important article to write. So I was
Right.
really pleased that you were able to step up and tell your stories. And we've had a great response to that article
I'm
as
glad.
well.
I'm glad, because I didn't know if I
Right.
counted since I'm not widowed. But
Right.
having lost a child, I feel like I understand, that a pet does, there are healing aspects
Absolutely.
to a pet.
There absolutely are.
They don't replace that person. But, I had interviewed the psychologist who was giving answers as to why pets are good. But like I said, you're happy to not have a pet. You can move forward happily without a pet.
I love my personal freedom. And I
And
have
you love
to
your
say,
magazine. I don't know how you would have a chance to do your magazine.
but this is free. This is how I'm using my freedom, so
Right.
that's fine. Every coin has two sides. I had a disappointing loss, and I wouldn't have chosen this path at all, but I'm here. And once I realized that I'm here, I started to try to look for the good in it. And I realized that for the first time in my life, I can do anything I want. So there's nobody who needs anything from me. And that freedom is almost paralyzing, because to make a marriage work, you compromise
Right.
in little ways every day. And it's fine, because you love the person. What goes around comes around. It comes back to you double. That's all fine. But the fact of the matter is, we have compromised for 40 years. And in the end, you really don't even know what you want. You don't know who's you and who's us anymore. And so it takes some time and some discernment to figure out what we want.
Well, I think it's really interesting that you're writing a book also. Now, you're covering, what kind of topics are you covering? And are you going to be putting some of those in the magazine? Or are you going to save it all to keep us nervously waiting for this book?
The book is called Common Sense for the Widower: Strategies for Living a Joyful and Meaningful Life After Loss.
And really, that is the whole theme of your magazine.
The
that
themes are the
subtitle.
same.
Okay.
The magazine, I think, is more seasonal, more today, more Valentine's Day, how to deal with that.
Right, how to deal with Christmas, how you're
right.
feeling about that, how to deal with Thanksgiving,
Right.
plus the fun shopping and all that.
Right.
Okay, so how is the book
The book
different?
is a little more global. It's more about how to get back into the workforce if you haven't been in the workforce for a while.
So a lot of serious how-to.
How to get ready for a storm and power outages.
Now, how did you do that?
Well,
with
I
you?
did some research with the National Guard and some other agencies, the Red Cross, who tell you what you should have in a go kit if you have to evacuate.
Right.
What should you have in your house?
So you've been doing a lot of research.
Things like that. Even how to choose a doctor, how to have a good doctor's appointment. What should you have in your medicine cabinet? When I talk to a lot of widows, they say, who's going to take care of me if I get sick? Well, go out now. What are you going to need? You're going to need chicken noodle soup. You're going to need an antibiotic or some cream, some aspirin, whatever it is you're going to need.
And now,
So that list is in the book.
Now, were these all things you came up with while you're sitting at the Von Trapp family lodge?
I did.
On vacation?
I took 2 weeks off up there, and I just wrote for I wrote for 4 hours. I skied for 4 hours, and then I wrote for 4 hours. So 8 hours a day I wrote for 2 weeks. Halfway through, I fell on the ice and broke my right wrist.
Oh.
So it was in a cast and I couldn't pronate, so I had to turn my keyboard this way so that I could
Really?
type.
And you were doing that?
Like I was playing the clarinet, I was typing.
Now, how do you come up with your, actually, I really like your letter from the editor every month in the magazine. It's very heartfelt. And is it because you're just, you read the articles that everybody's sending you? And because I know we have a lot of planning, which should go in which month, so we can pull together a theme. When do you write your letter from the editor? At what point in this process of putting this together?
Well, all the articles are submitted when I write my letter. So I have a chance to see what other people are writing about and what they're saying. And I always get an inspiration from the writers.
You seem to find a unifying theme.
It's always from my heart.
Right, I can tell that. You are a very from your heart person.
Like this month, it's Valentine's Day. So I talk about how difficult that can be when you're working and somebody who's working at the desk next to you gets flowers from their husband.
Right.
And you don't. And you know that they're not coming later. That's difficult.
Right.
How do you deal with that kind of a thing? And the way to deal with it is to anticipate it and be proactive. Buy a bunch of those little baby Valentines and give them out to everybody at the beginning of the day. Drop some flowers off at a neighbor who's alone. Do something that's loving and fun so that that flower delivery is only one part of your day.
Right.
If that becomes a major part
Of the day,
it's
you're
a
sitting
problem.
there waiting and waiting.
You need 10 other experiences to counter that.
And so a lot of your magazine is just things that you can do for others as well as yourself.
Absolutely. Because that's one of the biggest problems. We define ourselves by what we give. And you're Mr. Fix-It, you're the prankster, you're the good cook, you're the caregiver, you're the gardener. And so we have this thing that we give, and that defines us. We've lost the person who wants it.
Right. Now we only have about a minute and a half left. What do you want readers to know? First of all, they can go online, and a couple of the articles are free that they can read online.
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot online that they can read.
So tell us again.
And so go
where,
to www.widowedpathfinder.com.
Right, and it's flashing across the screen, so people will be able to see that.
Okay.
So they can go online, and I will also upload this in different places so people can see that website, so they can get on it, because they can read your comforting letter that I like, see a lot of the images, beautiful images.
Yeah.
You have some real artists,
Right.
artistic people, and I love the photos. Is it you picking them for my articles, or Jesse, or who's? Because a lot of my
We have a
Widowers of
great
History,
web
they're-
designer,
they're gone.
Jesse
so.
Carbone. He does a great job. And this is just from a McCook speech in Niantic by a friend of mine, Mary Jo McInnes. She's
Okay,
a
in our
social
last
worker.
couple seconds, what?
So subscribe and take out ads. We really need people to take out ads as well.
Yeah, because there's a lot of businesses that really can help people that are in this new phase of life. Maybe their spouse handled certain things. Now they're
Right.
ready to step out and look for a business.
Exactly.
To help them either manage money or help around the house, renovations.
Right.
So those would be the perfect kind of advertisers, or anybody that can offer
Absolutely.
advice, or any vacations,
Yeah.
anything. So advertisers should look online too
Exactly.
to see what people are reading. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, and you've got to read this magazine. I love it. Of course, I write for it, of course, but I do love it. It's great. Thank you so much for joining, and I will see you next week.